Welcome back. Spanish society never healed after the Civil War. The divisions and distrust grew sharper the more they were ignored. Some have decided the best way to move forward is to find out exactly what happened all those years ago.
The scale and pace of change in Spain since General Franco's death in 1975 have been impressive. This is a thriving democracy at the political heart of Europe. The current socialist government is certainly keen to remove all traces of the days when the military were in charge. There used to be a statue of General Franco on horseback on this plinth outside the Ministry for the Environment, but it's been taken down. And they're starting to address the Pact of Silence. But some here say it's thanks to the Pact of Silence that Spain has grown so quickly from a country riven by civil war and dictatorship into a modern liberal democracy.
I don't understand it. Because if our transition to democracy was successful and an example to other countries in the same situation, it was because the army knew what its mission was.
Colonel José Conde's house is a shrine to his conservative Catholic life and traditional Spanish values. He says that the way people are now viewing the period of military power disregards the realities of the past, and that people are wrong to disparage the military in the way they do.
Time passes. Spain came out of a civil war. We all know how it happened, we know who won and how he stayed in power. I won't say anything about this, but here was a nation that followed him. There weren't huge revolts, there were no political parties, not because they were banned, but because they didn't exist. The military did a lot of useful things in power.
And Colonel Conde's not alone. At General Franco's vast mausoleum outside Madrid, elderly Spaniards still come to hear Mass and pay their respects to the military dictator. And here, at the foundation set up in Franco's honour, they're happy to show me the mementos of their hero, lovingly displayed in the foyer. Under the previous Conservative government, the foundation got a public grant for its work, preserving, as they see it, a true record of the General's life and times. But of course, they make no mention of the mass graves.
Well, you see, these tombs are a consequence of the Civil War.
Es después de la guerra. This was after the war.
There's an explanation for the repression after the war. The Civil War produced a series of acts. Let's call them acts of vandalism, on both sides, because that's what civil war is like. But in the Republican Red Zone, tremendous atrocities were committed. In Spain, we've reached a point where we do not want to dig up the past.
I believe you must be a real evil person, an ill-will one, to defend that in a society, in a Western European democracy like ours nowadays, it is right to have a country crowded with people that are buried in the country, buried on the roadsides, or buried in real pitiful places like the one we are at the moment. We have a country that is full of mass graves. How do we want or intend to ignore this? It's pretty difficult, isn't it?
But ignored it has been for 70 years. I asked some of the student volunteers working at the graves if they were taught anything about this period in school. At school we weren't taught anything about it, but later in college we were told a bit more. But I found out much more by myself than I was ever taught about it.
Ignorar, no. Suavizar.
But it was like they weren't exactly covering it up, but smoothing it over in the name of so-called objectivity.
Ha sido falsa porque lo que ha conseguido es relativizar los hechos.
So in the end, they just succeeded in covering up the real story of the dictatorship.
Se hizo un silencio obligatorio, y no se repararon los daños de todo el periodo de la dictadura.
The volunteers are careful to preserve all the evidence they can. More than just returning the bodies of loved ones to their relatives, they want to be able to tell the true story of how these people died.
Unless we get these people back to the society they were grabbed and taken violently from, these people are not going to rest. They are restless. This is what silence has brought. A lot of people restless. Sometimes one gets the impression as if they had been waiting for everybody to die. And then the problem would resolve because there would be no one who could give an account of what happened.
In Uclés, the old people do still remember what happened. This beautiful little village lived through a time of fear and threats. Many here know of people who disappeared. One man told me he remembers seeing a woman burnt to death in this very square. Like all those who work for the association, Maximo is a volunteer. In his everyday life, he runs this language academy. He's trying to record as many testimonies as he can before the old people die, along with their memories. Today, Valeriano Fernandez is describing how his father was shot here in Uclés, and two of his uncles were shot in Madrid. He tells Maximo how, after his father was killed, the entire family were terrorized.
They arrived at midnight, broke into the house. They were looking for my uncle. He was the mayor, saying, if your uncle doesn't turn up, then you'll all be killed. So of course we were scared. They pulled the blankets off the beds night after night, looking to see who was sleeping there, searching for my uncle.
Since then, Valeriano's mother has had nowhere to go to mourn her husband. There was no acknowledgement of what had happened to him.
Now I feel a tingle down my spine. I feel tense and nervous when I think about them finding my father's remains and saying, this is him, this is your father. But I hold out hope that it happens. I have hope.
The wounds are open. You know, they say that we are reopening wounds, which is not true. The wounds are open themselves. And when a wound is open, it can get infected. And when it gets infected, it can give you major health problems. That's the health problem Spanish society has with this, you know. And what we try to do is clean the wounds by speaking about it, by letting fresh air to come in them, and hopefully closing the wounds forever.
But despite appearances, the past may not be another country. With the prospect of other regions following Catalonia's lead to autonomy, Colonel José Conde still doesn't rule out the possibility of the army intervening to stop what they perceive as a threat to Spain, just as it did in the past.
Let's imagine that things get worse and a part of our beloved land declares independence. And the soldiers are ordered to respect this situation, then watch out. Because at that point, something very serious could happen. I'm not saying that it is going to happen, but it could.
Despite the military past, Spain's future looks firmly democratic. Catalonia, the region that triggered the civil war, is now recognized as a semi-autonomous nation within Spain. That's all we have time for, but I hope you'll join me for the next edition of Witness.